We turn to the book of Proverbs, the 8th chapter, verses 1 through 4 and 22 to 31. In this passage, we hear teaching of a parent to their child, talking about how to live a life worthy of God's calling, and specifically how to answer the call of wisdom. So hear this reading from Proverbs. Does not wisdom call, and does not understanding raise her voice? On the heights, beside the way, at the crossroads, she takes her stand. Beside the gates, in front of the town, at the entrance of the portals, she cries out, "To you, O people, I call, and my cry is to all that live. The Lord created me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts long ago. Ages ago I was set up at the first, before the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth, when there were no springs abounding with water. Before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills, I was brought forth. When he had not yet made earth and fields or the world's first bits of soil. When he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep. When he made firm the skies above. When he established the fountains of the deep. When he assigned to the sea its limits, so that the waters might not transgress his command. When he marked out the foundation of the earth. Then I was beside him, like a master worker, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in his inhabited world, and delighting in the human race." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Let us pray. Gracious God, on this Trinity Sunday, when we stand before the mystery of what it means to worship you as God, Father, Son, and Spirit, we pray that you would bring us wisdom and encouragement. We ask it in your Son's name. Amen. This is a joke that may eventually grow old, but I'm hoping today is not that day. There is a reason that in churches with seminary interns, the Sunday after Pentecost is almost always one of the days that the seminarian preaches, because it is Trinity Sunday. And there are two reasons. One, it is a test to see how well the new theologian handles the topic of the Trinity. Secondly, the pastor doesn't want to have to handle the topic of the Trinity, because it is a topic fraught with complication, convolution, and complexity. Every image that we come up with for children's sermons, thankfully there was a good reason to talk about something totally different today, whether that is the clover or water in liquid, gas, and solid form. Whatever image we have for the Trinity, there's some reason why it's heretical, and in ages past you would have been burned at the stake for saying it. If you want to be uplifted about the future of the church, maybe don't spend too much time reading about church conflict in the past. But I think the presence of this reading from Proverbs today gives us a good corrective to our discussions about the Trinity, because it gives us a broader perspective. It helps us look at our understanding of God, the triune God, from something different than the normal dogmatic disputes of how we make sense of this holy mystery. I've said before that I believe one of the weaknesses of our Reformed tradition is our ability to engage with mystery. We Presbyterians really like having an answer to things. It makes us feel comfortable and at home to be able to point to chapter and verse or book of order reference about why something is the way it is, and we know that it is that way. But the Trinity is hard to make work like that. We can say things like, it is a holy mystery, 3 in 1 and 1 in 3. Well, what does that mean? This is one of those points when I say, I'm not actually sure. I know in my heart, but when I try to put it into words, my ministry colleagues often helpfully say, well, you know, they threw someone in a lake 500 years ago for saying that very same thing. I go, well, I'm not a very good swimmer, so we'll back away from that. But Proverbs gives us this broader perspective. In Proverbs, there is this discussion. If you've spent much time reading Proverbs, you will know that most of the book are these little pithy 1 or 2 verse sayings. Things like, you lazy bones, look at the way of the ant and take note. Oh, thank you. That's very helpful. I should be small and have lots of legs. Like, these pithy sayings that help us know about life. But more precisely, that help us see the holiness in the mundane moments of everyday life. Holiness that appears not through doctrine, not through theological reflection, not through going to a fancy school, but in seeing the beauty in everyday moments. The beauty of an ant, the beauty of a sunrise, the beauty found in meals shared. And I think that this reading from Proverbs, although typically included here because it's been the core of a Christological Trinitarian debate for hundreds of years, what does this tell us about the Trinity? I think it gives us 2 understandings about God. A God who delights and a God who is found in community. The Trinity is a community. And I think that is one of the most important starting points for our understanding of what makes Trinitarian faith so important. God is not some stoic, holy other that sits on far and judges us. God is 3 persons continually in relationship with one another. The creative force of God the Father, the redeeming, connecting word of Christ, and the empowering word and presence of the Spirit. Each one in relationship with the other. Each one building community. But more importantly, the community of the Trinity is not solely self-focused. It is not wholly inward-looking. The Trinity finds itself in its best way when it is in relationship with others. The Trinity finds community, as we read in this passage, through the creation of wisdom. This other who watches the creative power of God. The creation of mountains and lakes and oceans and clouds and trees and birds. But the Trinity also seeks out relationship with the creation through prophets and kings and poets and Jesus Christ himself, who walks alongside us on our journey. It is that necessity of communion, that necessity of community, that necessity of being linked with one another that makes the Trinity what it is. But it's not just community because of need. It is community that delights in the other. The very end of this passage, as wisdom speaks, I was daily God's delight, rejoicing before God, rejoicing in the inhabited world, and delighting in the human race. we see this image of not, again, this stoic other that just creates and then sets off to Lord knows what end. It is a God who delights in beauty, in creation, in people. Wisdom models that delight for us in this passage. Speaking of delighting in the creative power of God, the creative power of nature, the creative power of the human spirit. But God also models that delight for us. When we read the creation narratives, we hear about God being pleased. That's a very upright thing to say. God created and said it was good. I have to imagine that God created and went, wow, look at that. Isn't that amazing? Not because God did it, but because look at the sunrise, the trees and the birds. Look at these people who are learning to love. I think we do our faith a disservice when we take it too seriously. I'm going to say that again, because I think it's important. I think we do our faith a disservice when we take it too seriously. Now, that is not to say that we should not care about our faith. But if we take things too seriously, always approaching God as this thing in which we must do holy deference, we miss the joy and beauty that is the world in which we live. We miss the joy and beauty that is being in relationship with a God who wants a world filled with gorgeous things and loving people. Christ models a life of community and delight for us. Christ models community by not just coming and doing the work that he has been sent to do all on his own, but by calling a bunch of, frankly, fairly broken, dysfunctional people to do it with him. Christ models delight. Christ doesn't just tell, but Christ shows. Christ helps us see the path. And I believe that's our calling as well. To engage with our faith not just on an intellectual level, but on an emotional one. To engage with our faith in a way that seeks relationship and connection and hope. To follow our faith, to seek out community and to seek out delight. In doing it, I believe we will find wisdom in the love of God. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.